We are live. We are right at 6:01, and I've heard good meetings and forums start on time and end on time. So we're gonna kick this thing off. Just want to welcome everybody to another virtual DAC-WA forum for the Here and Now project. My name is Kenny Salvini. Most of the people that are on this list so far know who I am, but for those who may be tuning in on YouTube afterwards, this is our virtual forum that we kind of made the jump to in 2020 with the pandemic, and now it's begun to stick. And now we've got kind of the rotating quarterly meetings that we've been doing. We've been touching on all sorts of topics from adaptive recreation, vehicles, advocacy, and tonight we have another awesome presenter that I'm excited to introduce. I got hooked up with Jeremy a handful of years ago at an Oregon SCI Connection Wheel Connect event. And yeah, just a really good dude and passionate about this nonprofit that he runs, Cannabis Patients Northwest. Just a few kind of housekeeping things before we fully kick it off. I just want to thank all of our top tier sponsors, Kersey Mobility, who has just changed to Ability Center. If you guys didn't get to see that on our virtual 5K check-in, Movement Mortgage, and National Seating and Mobility. We couldn't do all of this great stuff without the help of our sponsors and their support. Yeah, just the housekeeping. We want to make sure you guys stay muted, and if you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We'll try to stay on top of them, but we will get to them probably after Jeremy and gets through his presentation. But yeah, and if anyone needs it, just a reminder, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, if you'd like a live transcript, you can click on that, and the Zoom automatic transcript, it does a pretty good job of transcribing everybody's voices and attributing it to the speakers. So you can do that. And with that, you know, I want to give a shout out to the whole DAC-WA team, especially Rob Wood, who's doing the technical work on the background here, making these things run so smoothly, and you know, just the rest of the DAC-WA crew that puts in a lot of work to put these things together and get these things set up. But with that, just want to thank everybody for being here, and I'll kick it to you, Jeremy. Welcome to the forum. Thanks so much for being a part of it.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I so appreciate the invite, and you know, pretty much anytime I get to talk about cannabis, it's awesome. But to talk about cannabis and spinal cord injuries to other wheelies is like one of the highlights of what I like to do. And so, yeah, I am a co-founder of a group that's called Cannabis Patients Pacific Northwest. My other co-founder is named David Benedictus. He is a retired psych nurse. And my background is I have a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. And both of us pretty much do this part-time. And it's been really kind of an evolution over a few years, a bunch of different stuff having happened, and kind of put the motion behind all this. And so anyway, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about cannabis and paralysis and spinal cord injuries. I'm going to do that using a PowerPoint presentation primarily. I'm going to toggle back and forth with a screen share to show that PowerPoint, and then just me talking. You know, if there are questions along the way, by all means, please put them in the chat. Or, you know, if it's something that's really burning, you know, signal me, and I can answer those as quickly as I can. And I'm definitely leaving time at the end to get through for questioning. So, okay, let's see here. In this forum, I'm going to go over quite a few different things. So I'm going to start out talking about me, which I can do pretty much endlessly, but specifically how come I use cannabis and why the group Cannabis Patients Pacific Northwest came into existence. I'm going to answer what is cannabis. like what are the different parts of it? THC, CBD, minor cannabinoids, delta 8, delta 9, delta 10, and terpenes. I'm going to answer how it works. So depending on the method of ingestion, so there's flowers, extracts, edibles, topicals, suppositories, transdermals, tinctures, and then what happens depending on the method of ingestion. I'm going to talk about some pretty sciencey big words and stuff like that. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can. So I'm going to talk about the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS, and how that relates to phytocannabinoids. I'm going to talk about the word cannabis versus marijuana. And I don't think I really need to define this. I will for the record though, but I'm going to tell you all what a spinal cord injury is. I'm going to look at how cannabis has been able to mitigate symptoms from spinal cord injury that include spasms primarily, pain secondarily, overactive bladder, some sexual dysfunction, insomnia, and then anxiety. And then going to talk about some research that goes on and some products that are made, pharmaceutical products that are made actually from cannabis, from a company called GW Pharmaceuticals, and then cannabis medicine that is available in the United States that is not pharma medicine, that kind of parallels this stuff that GW Pharmaceutical is able to produce. I'm going to talk a little bit about growing from a wheelchair, the tips and tricks, using seeds versus clones, some different cultivars, and then organic and salt growing. And then the Washington State medical cannabis versus recreational cannabis, how to get legal, how come to get legal, what it is about CBD and mixed ratios versus THC, which is something that they like to talk about when they define the difference between medical and recreational cannabis in Washington State. I'm going to talk about hemp CBD, and then dispensaries that are brick and mortar versus buying products online. The resources pretty much that I'm taking this from are the website that I have, that we designed and are really proud of. It's Cannabis Patients Pacific Northwest.org. And I will also cite some other things that I've looked at, some research that I've done and books that I've read. And then I'm going to get a bunch of questions from you guys, I'm sure. So that's me. My name is Jeremy John Robbins. I have been a cannabis activist for at least a dozen years now, probably more than that. I've been a legal cannabis patient in the state of Oregon for 19 years, and I've been legal in the state of Washington for 10 years. And so, you know, I think the story needs to start when I got injured. So I am coming upon my halfway mark. I'll be 23 years coming up on October the 3rd. And I will be 45 years old. So half of my life I've been in a wheelchair. And the reason I got here is because I was riding my mountain bike after working at a bike shop and drinking a couple of beers and smoking a bowl, which is what I did every single night. And I went to a park that was 2 blocks from my house. I was there with my Siberian Husky, and I did not want her to run into the street, so I thought I would swoop my bike down and keep her from doing that. I misjudged where I was, and instead of swooping down, I ended up riding off of a retaining wall. I did a big somersault in the air. My head landed up on the sidewalk, and my body basically was in the street, and that 6-inch curb busted my C5, 6, and 7. C6 was just completely obliterated, and C5 and C7 were sitting on top of each other, and my spinal cord was pinched. It was an incomplete injury, luckily enough. But I was in spinal shock immediately, you know, and pretty much was a very touch and go quad until it took a couple of weeks before they did the fusion and a bunch of other things. But eventually I was able to go to rehab, and I did that at the Rehab Institute of Oregon, and I was there, I think, for like 9 weeks, and you know, learned all about what this injury was about. Didn't really know too much about what the future would hold. They just filled me up with drugs. Like, they gave me a drug to make me to go to the bathroom. They gave me a drug to help me sleep. They gave me a drug because I was anxious. They gave me a drug because I was depressed. They gave me a drug because my blood pressure was low. They gave me a drug because I was in a lot of pain. Gave me a drug for my spasms. Gave me a drug for everything. And, you know, I appreciate pharmaceuticals for what they're worth. And at that time, it met a lot of my needs. But I went home taking, like, you know, 45 pills a day. And that was a tough one for me. And quite honestly, I was just in a fog. It took me, I don't know, about a year and a half. And my spinal shock had kind of gone down. I settled into being, you know, like a pretty high level C6, C7. And I realized that I didn't need to take all these meds. And so slowly but surely, I started substituting cannabis for using, you know, really, I started out with, you know, getting off of a lot of medicine for bowel and bladder stuff. And then worked on meds that, I mean, I had to kind of cold turkey pain medication. I was taking a bunch of different stuff. I reduced the long acting and was able to kind of cold turkey the short acting. And so, you know, cannabis became the thing. Like, it really did. It did a lot for my spasms in particular, and my spasms are good. I have some contractures. They like to try to stand me up. You know, they like to wiggle me off of my bed at night, wake up constantly. A lot of it is related to bowel and bladder issues, but I can't really like get on. I have got on top of that. I have no problems with bowel and bladder, but uncontrollable gas, and so that causes spasms. And so I just kind of learned, you know, what I could do with cannabis and what I couldn't do with cannabis. So I ended up on a blood thinner, Neurontin for spasms. And I'll tell you the story about that in a sec. And then crap for bladder spasms. Let me grab it right now. I can't even remember. Anyway, I reduced as many pharmaceuticals as I possibly could, and decided that that was really the best way for me. The Neurontin was interesting. I went in and was talking to my doctor one day, and he was like, "Jeremy, how come you take this meds?" And I was like, "I don't know, because you prescribed it to me." And he was like, "Well, your insurance isn't going to pay for it anymore, and so I have to stop prescribing it to you." And so he just DC'd it right then and there. And I cold turkeyed off of Neurontin for like the next month. It gave me the strangest sensations. It made me feel like I was falling backwards in space. And it was just not pleasant. The good news was that it went away. And I, you know, really, aside from the bladder pill, the blood thinner, and cannabis, that was what I did. Went back to school. I started playing wheelchair rugby. You know, I led an active disabled life. I got involved in doing accessibility work because, going back to college, I just couldn't get around the way that I knew that A, I should be able to, and B, that my legal rights entitled me to, and C, it was just the right thing to do. And so that kind of started me talking to people. I'm just looking at the chat. And so I'm glad that I was able to address that. The gas and the bloated and the spasms. It's a never-ending process. So anyway, as I got more involved doing things, my pain got bad. My arms started really, really hurting, my elbows, my wrists, my shoulders. I went in and had a nerve conduction study done, and they determined that I had all this, stuff, and they wanted to do surgery. But in the immediate, they started giving me short-acting narcotics again. And I ended up taking short-acting narcotics, and actually a bunch of different narcotics, for like 7 years. And finally just got to the point in the early 2000s where it just was not, so they were starting to crack down on doctors. So it was getting really increasingly challenging to get the meds, aside from the fact I had to go get a script every month and see a different doctor on a pretty regular basis to make sure that I still had the pain issues. It sucked. And I just felt fog. And, I was getting done with graduate school. I had taken a little hiatus from cannabis. I had quit in 2009 for a year, and I was racing my hand bike for the Portland State cycling team, and it was great. And I got done with hand cycling, and I was still taking all these damn pills, and I just I got done with them. I think that we all know what that's like. Sometimes you just end up getting done with stuff. So I ended up not doing anything for a period of time, and my spasms blew me up. I rarely was able to sleep, and it just made mobility really challenging. My legs were constantly flapping around. And again, I have an incomplete injury, and so I have like deep touch sensation. I don't have any movement, but I definitely can feel strange signals that go through. And so there's a lot of noise, is what I call it. And I think doctors probably would refer to that as neuropathy. And so I had to do something for the neuropathy, for that noise. And so I started using flower again. And this was all pre-legalization. And so it served its purpose. Again, when I first got my script in 2001 or 2002, I asked my doctor, "Hey man, do you know where I can get any seeds or starts?" And he just laughed and he said, "No, that's not a part of my job. I just signed this thing." And so I had to find all that. I had to learn how to cultivate. There was a lot of heartbreak. Anyway, this picture shows my current garden setup. I have plants that I grow legally here at my home in the backyard. I'm quite proud of my garden. It's been a labor of love, and it does amazing things. There's nothing sweeter than the fruit of your own labor. I think it's the same way if you grow a tomato or an apple or a tulip or whatever it is. If you're pouring out your heart and soul into something that is a little tiny seed and then ends up this gigantic, towering, beautiful plant, it really does have therapeutic value. So I enjoy doing that quite a bit. So what does this group do? In short, we are a nonprofit. We want to do education, advocacy, and normalization. What we what David and I realized primarily as educators along the way is that doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs don't know anything about cannabis. There's reasons that they don't know. There's limited research. You know, it continues to be a Schedule I federal narcotic. And it's also, I think, in a lot of places in the US still demonized. I will say, though, that it's legal in 36 states recreational or medically and 18 states recreationally. However, there's still pockets in the Deep South that if you get caught with any cannabis, you're going to go to jail. So this group is we're a health advocacy group that provides education to healthcare professionals, professional organizations like yourself, the legal profession, and the public at large about medical cannabis. And so the way that we kind of met is that legalization happened. There was a lot of push to get people to understand what cannabis was and some of the potential benefits, some of the pitfalls. And my friend David Benedictus started teaching a course that was offered at Clark College, which is a community college here in Vancouver, that was called Cannabis in Your Health. And again, through my activism, we were able to cross paths, and he asked me to come in and to speak to his class about my experience and similar to what I'm talking to you guys about. It was an amazing class, and it was a part of the adult education series, and I enrolled it at the next term that it was offered. So it was offered twice a year in the fall and then again in the spring. And we were able to figure out like different things to talk about in the class. We were able to really develop some great course material. And then the classes ended, and we were kind of there were a bunch of people that we were really enthusiastic about sharing information with. And again, between these classes, we were all just kind of in limbo. And so we started talking and figured out that we wanted to meet as a group. And so we needed a meeting space. And so I opened my home for a year to upwards of like 25 people that would come on the last Wednesday of the month. And we would just kind of powwow, and we would talk about different subjects, things that they were interested in talking about that Dave and I could research. And then, we would also just leave it open to folks that had things going on that they A, needed support about, and then B, had questions about how cannabis might be able to help them. And so we kind of outgrew my house, and we needed a different spot. There were brick and mortar CBD shops that were opening up all over Washington state. And there was one that was about, a little more than 1.5 miles away. And it was called American Shaman CBD. They opened their doors to us, and we were able to transition our group pretty successfully from my home to this CBD store. Same meetings, but really interesting participants. And, there was a lot of growth. This was like, 2018, 2019, late 2018, early 2019. And, the pandemic hit, and we could not meet any longer. And so like you guys, we kind of had to transition to an online forum, and we've had mixed success with that. In fact, this last month, we were just ready to go back to doing in-person meetings. And unfortunately, the CBD store that we were meeting at, American Shaman, was not able to keep their lease, and they closed. So now we're kind of in the space where we're going to figure out what to do next. We really will probably always have this online offering. It seems to have a bigger reach, but at the same time, there's something to be said about getting together with people and like figuring out what is working and what's not working. Okay, so next, what is cannabis? So there's two main components, THC and CBD. THC is tetrahydrocannabidiol, CBD is cannabidiol. They do different things. THC reduces inflammation and pain and muscle spasms. It helps with sleep, does not help with anxiety, and it gets you high. CBD reduces inflammation, some pain, definitely muscle spasms, definitely helps with anxiety. It also kind of helps to nuance or balance out that THC. And so there's a bunch of different ways that we are able to get these two components in. Oops, I think I skipped ahead a little bit. So there's a bunch of other stuff too. I'm forgetting all the other stuff. There's these things called minor cannabinoids, and they are really fascinating. So along with the rise of legalization, we started getting really good at like figuring out how to do stuff with cannabis. And by stuff, I mean primarily extracting it. And the way that they extract it is using different solvents. And so they use alcohol, they use CO2, they use butane and propane. But I've even heard about, I mean, they use ice water, they use air now. And so in doing these things, they're able to break apart the old THC and the CBD and discover all of these minor cannabinoids. So there's like 450 different minor cannabinoids that are active in any given sample of cannabis flower. And so what are those things? Yes. So first and foremost, they're pretty much for the most part, they're not too psychoactive. They are things. So CBC, which is cannabichromene, CBG, which is cannabidiol, and then the one that does kind of get you high is called CBN, and it is THC that has been degraded. And so why, what's up with these things? What do they do? Why are they important? Well, they have profound effects without, really getting you high. And so, for instance, CBG is really popular with a lot of folks that have ASD, autism spectrum disorder. CBG is what they call like the stem cell of cannabis, and they can make a bunch of different products for it. But as a standalone, it has these really fantastic properties, and it again, it has this balancing effect. And for a lot of folks, that's really what they're looking for is for balance. There's also these interesting delta. In fact, it is called delta-9 THC. And what that talks about is the way that the carbon atoms line up. Well, what we've learned again through extractions and stuff like that is there's a bunch of different deltas, and some of them are quite popular. So right now there's the substance that's called delta-8 THC, and it's really great. It actually have some with me right now. It's a distilled product, so it's made with alcohol primarily. They take a CBD isolate and they add a solvent to it, and then they heat it up to a certain temperature. The delta-8 crashes out of it, and then they distill that and make these syringes. And so it doesn't have that euphoric high. It's very uplifting and energetic. And so like using it in the evening to go to sleep is probably not the best idea. But it's got these really great qualities. It kind of kills pain. I definitely don't have spasms when I take it, and it's pretty functional. And so it's widely available. It's actually available in places like Texas, which currently are not a legal state. The reason that it's legal is because it's made from hemp CBD, and hemp CBD is legal according to the 2018 Farm Bill in all 50 states, quote unquote. However, we know that that's not the case. Idaho, you don't want to mess with them, and in a lot of other places too. It's just still not accepted. So anyway, what's happened now, because Delta-8 has been so popular in those places, is they're starting to draw up legislation, and primarily they're banning it. And so again, chemistry at work, they have now made something called Delta-10, and Delta-10 is much more intoxicating than say Delta-8 is. It still has a lot of these same sort of pain relief, muscle spasm, suppression, sleep aids. I don't think that it will help with anxiety. Delta-8 really doesn't help with anxiety. And so it's really interesting that they continue to make these things. The other part of this is that when you eat an edible that has THC, Delta-9 THC, that goes through your liver, it gets converted into something called Delta-12. And Delta-12 has a very long-lasting effect. That's why when you eat an edible, it lasts like 8 hours or more sometimes, and can even give you kind of a hunger feeling the next day, depending on what it is. And so it's really fascinating to me because I started out using just this flower, and I didn't have really any idea how come it worked, or really anything more than I was attracted to certain smells and flavors, and then certain highs I experienced. So the smells and flavors have really they have really come around and are very meaningful. And so they're called terpenes, and terpenes are aromatic oils. They exist pretty much in everything, like literal, like floral flowers have them, fruits and vegetables have them. There's even terpenes in, like gasoline and petroleum products. Anyway, it's that smell, and for some items, that smell kind of transitions a little bit to a flavor. Those flavors are actually called flavonoids. And so you have cannabinoids, you have terpenes, and you have flavonoids. And all of these things working together are something that they call the entourage effect. And the entourage effect is really what, as a medical user, I'm looking for. And that's so I'm getting a little bit of the whole plant, a little bit of everything. I'm not getting, too much of any one thing. My goal is to not get high. My goal is to use the bare minimum, because it's expensive for me. My insurance doesn't pay for this. Even with my medical status and growing and all that, it still, runs about $300 a month. The other thing is I have to function. I ingest plenty of cannabinoids, and so the more moderate that I can be with them, I think in the long term, the better off I can be. However, I also pay attention to terpenes and flavonoids, how things taste. So how does it work? How do you get all these things in you? Well, there's a bunch of different ways. In Washington State, we're super lucky because we have a pretty robust recreational system. And so you can go out and you can buy cannabis flower. You can buy extracts in the form of what they call dabs. You can buy edibles. You can buy topicals, suppositories, transdermals, tinctures, vape pens. Here's a vape pen. It's super duper handy when I get those really bad stomach issues in the middle of the night and I don't want to get up. I will take this thing. And I like to use a combination, primarily CBD, or like about equal amounts of THC to CBD. And I will puff on this in the middle of the night and it will knock down those spasms enough that I can kind of roll over and go back to sleep for a few hours. So here is just a list of a bunch of different things. Smoothies, which is that is a nod a little bit to juicing cannabis leaves, which is something that's popular among medical users, people that have access to fresh cannabis leaves. Again, you're getting some of the benefits without getting high from it. The way that cannabis grows, you're not really getting a high from it until you heat it up. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, here you have the good old bong with some cannabis flower. There's a volcano vaporizer, which is kind of the peak of the medical vaporized or inhaled administration routes. They're very expensive. They're about $550 a piece. I've had one for many years. I don't use it hardly at all anymore. So there's a bunch of different vaporizers that you can use flour and oil in. Let's see, there's sublinguals, which is like a tincture. And so you'd put that underneath your tongue and that would absorb. Here is just a straight tincture. I'll talk a little bit more about sublinguals. They have some sprays that are really effective too. And again, you're going to spray that underneath your tongue and get a much quicker relief than if you were going to eat it. Probably not as fast as if you were smoking it or vaporizing it. Some of my favorite things are transdermal patches. I didn't really discover them until maybe a little over a year ago. No, I take that back. I have friends that have been making them for years in Oregon. I didn't start using them until really about a year ago. And I use them all the time. The biggest thing for me is that the adhesive on them sometimes causes a rash. I have very sensitive skin. It also, depends on where you put it. I often put it on my arms, on the backs of my arms, on my wrists. I find though, if I put it on my wrist, they really have a tendency to leave a mark. Anyway, what transdermals do is they give you consistent dosing. So they give you a certain amount for over a certain amount of time. You can also cut them into smaller pieces and that just gives you, again, the same dosing amount. It just is going to give you a shorter amount of time. Suppositories, I have a buddy that is C56 Quad that uses cannabis suppositories for his bowel program pretty much every day. And he can do this pretty cheaply because he has an apiary. He keeps bees and so uses some of the honey stuffs, the waxes and coconut oil to make his suppositories. And he says that he's able to get cannabinoids in his system without really feeling high from it. It's not passing through your liver. And so it's not really changing into that Delta 12 and it's not getting into your bloodstream the same way. Topicals are like the go-to for the majority of the people that I deal with in the group Cannabis Patients Pacific Northwest. For aches and pains, there's nothing quite like some sort of a topical preparation. I use topicals as often as I can get them. We were donated some not too long ago, and so I have a decent supply right now. And again, for my shoulders that ache, wrists, elbows, all those sort of things, it's great. It's also a good good transition for a lot of people who are kind of afraid of cannabis. You can't really get high from, you know, putting something that has cannabis in it on your skin. That barrier is not being crossed over, and so it doesn't really get you high. The last thing is a great medical product. It's called full extract cannabis oil, or FECO, or another name for it is Rick Simpson oil or Phoenix tears. And what it is it's a concentrated form of cannabis that they have used alcohol to strip off the cannabinoids. Then they boil the alcohol off of it, and they leave this black goo. You can also then go ahead and distill it, and it leaves, it cleans up the blackness, and it becomes a clear distilled product that doesn't have any flavor or smell or anything. And so this is a product that is really useful for a lot of different people. Again, like for me, for sleep and spasms, this is my go-to. I primarily use dabs. I also forgot to mention that there are rosin dabs. And so again, what they're doing is they're concentrating the crystals that are on the flower and making it into a product that you're able to vaporize and smoke. And so I get pretty instantaneous relief. And then I use this full extract oil pretty religiously, and it just knocks out my spasms and a lot of my pain. So those are the big methods of ingestion. And again, depending on how you are using one of these products, it's going to shape the experience that you're going to end up having. Okay, well, how come this stuff all works? What's it about? So it has to do with this thing called the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS. And the endocannabinoid system is in pretty much every mammal. And it's been a process to discover this, but what it is it's a homeostatic modulation system which keeps us healthy by acting as a check and balance on molecular signaling networks. And so there's a bunch of places that the ECS is active. You know, the big places, it's active in the brain, it's active in the gut, and you know, I think those are really the places that they are looking at to regulate it. And so what they started seeing is that when they were able to modulate this ECS, things just kind of leveled out on a lot of different, for a huge number of things, including things like, you know, lymphatic systems and circulatory systems, issues with the nervous system, and digestion. All those things really seem to kind of fall into line, into synchronicity. And they started looking at how come, what was going on when this wasn't happening, and they started seeing this thing called an ECS deficiency. And the deficiency can be caused by a bunch of stuff. So physical or emotional trauma, toxic stress, repetitive injury, infection, metabolic problems, diabetes, and exposure to toxins and some drugs are all possible causes of an ECS deficiency. So basically, living life, especially being a person with a disability, is probably going to cause an ECS deficiency. And so one of the most effective way to modulate this deficiency is by using phytocannabinoids. And so phytocannabinoids are cannabinoids that are created in plants, in cannabis primarily, but in other plants as well. And so, like, for instance, you know, they are able to manufacture CBD out of mosses and also out of certain yeasts. And so it seems like uh, uh, being able to take these phytocannabinoids and then ingest them, it again is helping with this modulation of this endocannabinoid. So it's in us, endocannabinoid system. There's also a little graphic on the far right-hand side, and it shows some of the receptors that are going on with the ECS. And so what they've discovered along the way is that cannabinoids are most active on CB1 and CB2 receptors that are a part of the endocannabinoid system. These receptors are in different parts of the body. The CBD1 receptors are primarily in your brain, and the CB2 receptors are primarily in your gut. And again, they're helping to modulate different things, doing that through this kind of this lock and key process that goes on very similarly with what happens with the firing of neurons in spinal cord injuries. And, you know, when an injury happens, there isn't quite that fit of that lock and key anymore. It seems like regulating the ECS really does help to smooth out some of those jagged edges around the lock and key mechanisms with spinal cord injuries. And so that being said, what are some of the things that they're using cannabis to do with spinal cord injury management? So the big thing for me, at least, and for a lot of people that I know, it really helps with spasms. It helps as effective as baclofen, Neurontin, probably Valium, and there's another one that I didn't end up taking. And so for me, at least, this is my go-to, and I can find pretty immediate relief if I'm having really bad spasms in the moment, and then I can kind of prepare for the long term by ingesting the FICO. The other thing is that it does, in fact, help with my neuropathy and my pain. When I broke my toe a few years ago, my leg just would not stop jumping. It would not stop jumping. And I was eating Vicodin, and that somewhat helped, but it was by smoking cannabis that really finally got my toe to stop. I guess it was like a different kind of a spasm, but probably again, all of these are kind of related to each other and kind of intermingling. I have a buddy who's his urologist prescribed him cannabis because he had an overactive bladder. He was taking ditropan, which is or oxybutynin, which is what I take as well, and that still was not really helping him. And so this was one of the routes that they thought would really be a positive thing for him. I can tell you that when I really need to go pee, I definitely can use inhaled flower or extracts, and it kill it for a couple of hours. I still can kind of sort of feel it in the back, but I don't have the feeling of immediacy, and I don't have the same sort of dysreflexia. And so, yeah, it can, again, probably related back to spasms and how it's really relaxing a lot of things throughout the body. So anxiety, this is kind of a crapshoot. CBD for sure helps with anxiety. There are a lot of different CBD products out there. there's a lot of different literature about it. I can talk at length about certain cultivars that really are, they do incredible things for anxiety. The flip side of that is that most cultivars that you're going to find in the recreational system that are high THC are going to bring anxiety, especially ones that are narrow leaf cultivars, things they used to call sativas. We don't really use that too much anymore. But it's kind of a tough one, and also some varieties that are at that 1-to-1 ratio, which is really what I look for personally, is finding something that has equal amounts of THC and CBD. I do that in kind of a different way, mostly by ingesting CBD outside and then smoking THC. But what we've learned along the way is a lot of it's related to terpenes. And if you can minimize certain terpenes that are really uplifting, it helps with anxiety. This is the other side of the coin, is that THC, when it degrades, it's been left out for a while, really helps with insomnia. And so if it's fresh, it can make you anxious. If you let it sit out for a while, and then particularly if you bake it, make it into like a cookie or something like that, it can really help you with sleep and insomnia. The other thing that I want to talk about is sexual dysfunction, and this is something that is really interesting. Cannabis is known to be two things: a vasodilator or a vasoconstrictor. And when you have that constriction go on, lo and behold, it traps blood. And so certain cultivars really do a good job of vasoconstriction. And again, those are really the ones that kind of make you anxious. But it's a reason that some people talk about how cannabis is their love drug, because it really does kind of help with sexual dysfunction. Okay, back to the CBD or CB1 and CB2 receptors. And so this relates a little bit back to the ECS, and the CB1 receptor blocks signals from one neuron to another as circuit breakers and downregulates pain. And that's primarily found in the brain. And CB2 receptors in the immune system and the gut regulate inflammation and the peripheral nervous system. They work on anxiety areas in the brain, the amygdala. Sedation happens because of the way that the CB2 is activated, and then the CB2 is probably more active overall. Anyway, that's kind of the breakdown of the chemistry of the phytocannabinoids and the endocannabinoids. You can kind of see here in this diagram of how they're synaptic circuit breakers. And so they just, again, are like locks and keys. The discovery of this is not very old at all. And to that end, research is really, it's pretty spotty. It's challenging in the United States because it continues to be federally illegal. There was one place that you could get government weed, and that was the University of Mississippi. I have a friend that was one of the very few recognized medical cannabis patients for glaucoma, in fact, in the United States. And they shipped her these gigantic tins of this really, really bad stems and seeds and leaf rolled up into cigarettes for her to smoke from the government. And this is at the same time that they claim that there is no medical benefit for cannabis. Well, we know that they're wrong about a lot of things, and this is yet another one that they really, not only are they wrong about, but they do a really good job in like trying to keep the information away from people that would really benefit from it, and definitely keep the drugs out of the hands of a lot of folks that would benefit from it. So there's a really interesting drug that actually, I take that back. So this is a great book. It's called Cannabis and Pharmacy by Michael Bax. It talks about all sorts of different conditions and how cannabis might help those conditions, talks about all sorts of different types of cannabis, and just a lot of great information. Anyway, you know, in this particular book, it doesn't talk about spinal cord injuries. Spinal cord injuries fall in with muscle sclerosis and what they call movement disorders. So similar to like ALS and things like that. But they talk a lot about spasticity and pain. And that they also talk about like what really works. And what they say is that, blending different THC dominant chemotypes yields the best relief from spasticity and pain. The logic of this approach seems valid that through blending different types of cannabis, a greater entourage effect of terpenoids and minor cannabinoids is created. That's, again, back to what I was saying. This is always kind of the goal that I have, is to get a full plant experience. But in looking at the research around this stuff, it's really spotty, except that, again, you start discovering these things like this drug that's called Sativex. And it is a British drug. It's been made in Britain for like 20 years. However, it's not available in Britain except through special, you have to apply for it. It's available in Canada, Spain, some other places in Europe. I think it's available in Australia. And what it is it's similar to this. It's a 1-to-1 THC to CBD inhaled. It's actually a sublingual spray that they are making by extracting cannabis flowers, full cannabis plants, in fact. And they extract it using CO2, and then they mix it with a couple of different things so that they can get it into a spray form. And it's fairly expensive, but it's pretty well researched, one of the few things that have been, and it works really good for people with spinal cord injuries, but I can't get it. And so it's frustrating. Again, there's another medication that's made by the same company. It's called Epidiolex, and it was designed primarily for people with Dravet syndrome, which is like a very severe seizure disorder. But probably off-label, it would work with spinal cord injuries. The regulations around it and the costs are just astronomical. That particular drug is like at least $36,000 a year. And so, we have been kind of stuck in the research and around this. There was a 30% reduction in pain. People stopped taking their opioids as much. It's not a huge dose. It's actually, per spray is 2.7 milligrams of THC and 2.5 milligrams of cannabidiol. So let me put that into perspective. That's the very basic baseline that you would possibly feel anything. 5 milligrams. When we talk to people, are kind of coaching people into using cannabis for the first time. 5 to 10 like 10 milligrams, you're going to start to something. 15 milligrams, definitely of THC, of CBD, probably more than that, 20 to 25 milligrams. And so it's fascinating that they say that this little, as 5 milligrams, again, it's sublingual, that might make a difference, but that it really helps with pain and spasms. So, to get this, they say that you have to kind of qualify for it by not responding to other medications. I don't know if really that should be the best thing. And then they say, like most other cannabis products, you have to find the sweet spot. There's no, and that's it with cannabis. It works well for some people. It works well for me. It doesn't work well for everybody. It doesn't work well for a lot of people. You have to find your sweet spot. You have to find the place where that ECS is activated, where you're able to do the things you need to do, but you're not intoxicated to the point where you can't function. And so, this is literally from the Sativex website. And they say, the number of sprays, you're supposed to start, of course, with one and wait, and then take another one. You can take up to 12 per day is what they recommend. And, I did the math, and I would be taking, so each Sativex sprayer has 100 doses in it. And I would use them very regularly. And so I don't know, I would like to try something like that and see how it works out. So back to the entourage effect and kind of talking about all the different combinations of things. This again shows a little bit more in color what's going on and all the potentials with cannabis now, just beside the CBD and THC that we felt. So what's happened because we're not able to get pharmaceutical grade products is that there are people that are pharmacists and other medical professionals, doctors, that have dedicated their time and their research to cannabis, and they've come up with these protocols. And so, I know of a lot of people that choose to use cannabis specifically to fight their cancer. And now that we have a better idea about this entourage effect and the fact that you need a little bit of all these things, especially terpenes and flavonoids, when their pharmacist, their compounding pharmacist is making these preparations for them, they are able to add all of these different things. And so I know of, this is an example of combinations of cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids that have been researched by this gentleman, Ethan Russo, who is a doctor here in Washington State. He primarily does his research overseas, and it's for all these different conditions. And so like for depression, THC, a mix of THC, CBD, CBG plus limonene really helps to bring people up. Limonene is a terpene that is found in lemons and oranges, and it has a citrus scent, and it really helps to kind of uplift you. So for anxiety, using heavy CBD plus, I would say, sparse limonene and heavier linalool. Linalool is found in lavender. Lavender is what they use in aromatherapy to really help relax you. Sedation, THC, CBD, that degradation plus myrcene helps when you need to really be on the couch. If you have an injury and you need to lay around and you're one of those folks like me that is fidgety, this is what helps. So agitation to Alzheimer's, THC and CBD combination plus limonene, linalool, and pinene. Pinene is a terpene that is found in pine needles and in the forest, and it's quite uplifting. And so again, like probably in pretty sparing amounts, you would want to use that sort of stuff. For sleep, again, THC and they say caryophyllene, linalool, and myrcene. Those are all terpenes that are really relaxing, but also using high CBN is going to help us sleep. What's awesome is you can get transdermal patches that are CBN specific, and so you put this patch on and it just puts you to sleep, and you sleep great, and you take it off the next morning and you're good to go. You don't have to eat anything, you don't have to smoke anything, and you can cut it in half so you get a little bit more bang for your buck. So in addiction studies, they found out that you can, especially for like methamphetamines, using super duper high levels of CBD plus caryophyllene can help to curb some of those cravings when you're coming off of things like meth. So anyway, it's fascinating. So there's been kind of this parallel research that has gone on in the United States to what's gone on in places that are able to access cannabis, like Israel, for instance. And because we don't have the access, but we have this recreational system, we are again able to discover these novel combinations, and also do things like come up with stuff to help fight cancer. So I have been a medical patient for a long time, and there's the main reason that I became legal is, first and foremost, I was using cannabis before it was legal. Also, in Washington State, in order to grow cannabis, you have to be a medical patient. You can grow up to 15 plants, and that's a little different than most other places. For instance, Oregon gives you kind of set numbers. You can flower 6 plants there, and you can have 18 immature plants. And so it's a little more, you have to kind of figure out what you're doing with those 15 plants here. The big thing is, before legalization happened, being a part of the medical system, it gave me what they call an affirmative medical defense. And so it just meant that doctors had said that cannabis does work really well for me, despite what anybody else thinks, and that I should be allowed to use it. And it, there's a certain amount of freedom. I went to a dispensary yesterday to pick up some products, and it was ironic. There was a police officer that pulled up right at the same time that I did. And I didn't flinch or think twice about hopping in my chair and going in. I thought, man, maybe he can help me carry out some of my stuff. Just because I've been legal for so long, I am not breaking the law. I'm not doing things that that are out of the way that they have set the system up. And so, I think that being legal just gives you a peace of mind, and I have never really had to worry about a lot of the things that a lot of other friends that I know, both in and out of chairs, worry about. And so I am a part of a couple of Facebook groups that deal with spinal cord injury and cannabis. One of them in particular, every time I post a picture, somebody asks me to mail them weed, and my heart goes out to them. But again, I follow kind of the rules and the laws that have been set up. It's also a pain in the ass to mail weed, and I just don't do it. But what that reminds me is that access continues to be an issue, and that legalization is a huge deal, and that we need to continue to fight for it. slowly but surely, they really want the tax dollars, and so the medical systems in most states is getting just absorbed into the recreational system. In Washington State, though, there's been some pretty healthy stuff. This is not the link. Anyway, this was supposed to, and I'm not quite sure why it's not working now, but that links to my website that shows kind of the steps that you would need to go through to get your authorization. And so what you have to do is you have to see a medical professional in the state of Washington. They're primarily naturopaths. You can see a regular doctor though. They're going to ask you, you know, the conditions from which you're suffering in Washington State. You know, I think there's like 15 or 16 qualifying conditions. Again, spasms happen to be one of them. Pain is one of them. And there's some other nuances too that people with spinal cord injuries are going to probably qualify for. The next thing you have to do is you have to pay them. And it sucks because, again, like I wish they would just stamp permanent on there and let me do it. But I have to pay $150 every year to somebody to authorize this thing that I use all day, every day for a long time. So there is a certain irony to being a legal medical patient. And I wouldn't be any other way, but the fact that I have to pay for it out of my pocket is it's a little bothersome to me. So then the next thing you do is you have to go to what they call a medically endorsed dispensary, and you have to talk to a medical endorsed bud tender. And these folks are supposed to know about medical conditions and kind of how to advise you about what to take, and they don't. It's a course that costs $500. I don't have the money. I have the course. I don't have the money to pay for it. It's pretty simple. And what I've experienced is, you know, these are very good-hearted people. But in the long run, like if you're facing some serious health challenges, you would be much better off contacting my group or contacting, you know, someone else that has been involved in the activism side of it or the medical side of it for a while. So anyway, it's been good, and I don't foresee me not being legal. However, it is challenging in Washington State. You cannot you can't get any seeds or starts per se. They don't sell them in any dispensaries. You can order them online. You can't go and get cuttings from any of the producers. Or let me take that back. There's two places where you can get cuttings from producers. You can get 15 cuttings. You have to pay for them out of pocket, of course. And there's no guarantees on how good they are. And so it's a real challenge to grow up here. You have to kind of plan ahead. I'm lucky enough down here in that I can go over to Oregon, and because they have such a robust system there, both recreationally and medically. Again, in Oregon, anybody can grow 4 plants legally in their home. And so there are fairly consistent seeds and starts there. And, you know, so what I've started doing as a part of the group is that I have seed breeders that will donate me seeds that then I can give out to authorized patients that come to my group or other folks that contact me. One of the things, because paying for an authorization is tough for a lot of people. We are primarily, you know, low income. Down the line, when we have funding, we would love to be able to pay for people to get authorized, to be able to go to the doctor, to be able. The other thing is, once you go to the medically endorsed dispensary, they register you with the Department of Health, and then they charge you $10. And so, you know, it's $160 a year to get one of these things, and that's a renewal fee. I'm sure it's probably over 200 to get it new. And so, yeah, we would love to be able to step in and be able to provide that for people, as well as being able to provide them medicine. And so that's something that I've done for a long time. Is I have given away a lot of cannabis, cannabis oil, cannabis flower, edibles, tinctures, pills, you name it. I won't mail it, but if you come and visit me, or if we meet halfway, that's how the system had to work. And that's also why the group has been so important. Before legalization happened, for me to access any cannabis, I had to drive to Olympia to go to the markets, Olympia, Tacoma, Black Diamond, Seattle. Those were all the markets that we went to like every weekend for years, both vending and purchasing products. But in Southwest Washington, where we are, it was like a vacuum. And so being able to find access was really challenging. And so again, it's a little bit better now, but the really one of the pushes for having a nonprofit is just to be able to provide information about all these things. And so it's been great. The last thing that we do is we continue to go to Olympia to talk to legislators, to talk to folks that are making the decisions with the money. Recently, there are always rulings from what they call the LCB, so that's the Liquor and Cannabis Board. And so all of the syntax in the state of Washington is overseen kind of by the same folks, except for the medical program, which is overseen by the Department of Health. And so there's these two opposing groups that are trying to run these programs, and they don't like it. I do think, though, that it behooves them to keep them separate in all states, but that's slowly changing. So here's a picture with a couple of cannabis attorneys that we like to come and talk to our class. They are active in Portland as well as Seattle, and it's kind of an ever-changing thing. And so keeping abreast of what's going on is really good for us. And that's also a kind of the last component to our group. So this is our contact info. And here's the last thing I'm going to talk about. So this is a picture of me on the cover of New Mobility magazine. New Mobility is a great, awesome magazine for spinal cord injuries and other wheelers. And this is at an indoor grow in Portland that was probably one of the most accessible grows I've ever been in. And it was awesome for me to be able to go, and I volunteered there. It was called Ideal Farms, and I am really fortunate to be good friends with the owner. And so the way that this particular grow worked was that everything was on these tables, and the tables were like 8 feet long by 4 feet wide, and they were on casters that rolled around. And inside of the tables were these trays that were plastic, and inside of the trays were plants, and the plants were all cloned, and so they were pretty short. I was able to access the root system and water things. I was able to pull off leaves, and so the other thing they did is they trellised everything. And so as the plants grew up, they grew through netting. And the netting held things in place, as well as it kept things from going really, really tall. And so it was awesome. I could wheel around in there. I could move things around and be able to access all the plants. Again, they didn't get too big because they were primarily cloned, and so they were all the same thing. They were all the same height. And it was a great experience. I had a pretty thorough article in New Mobility talking about a lot of different aspects of medical. This says medical marijuana, and so quickly the word marijuana is a slang term. It's actually a term that they didn't use for a long time, and then they started using because it was a racist term towards Mexican immigrants, and a lot of times they will spell it with an H, N-A-R-I-H-U-A-N-A, and in fact, a lot of the laws that are written in the state of Washington are written with the word marijuana spelled like that. Well, we live in a world where we're trying to be less racist, and honestly, it doesn't capture the full breadth of what cannabis is. And so for research and for professional and for just conversational purposes, I never ever use the word marijuana. I use the word cannabis. So that being said, medical cannabis is constantly changing across the nation, and yeah, it's fascinating. I love the fact that it really is a product that has made a big positive impact in my life. I feel healthier because I'm able to use these products and not a lot of pharmaceuticals. And the reality of cannabis and cannabis legalization is it's kind of like, they squirted toothpaste out of the tube, and sometimes they want to put it back, but the toothpaste is out, and there's lots of folks already brushing their teeth with it. And so my personal opinion is that we need to figure out federal regulation. We need to make medical products available to medical patients, and we need to figure out the nuances of the research and science behind this, because it really does have a lot of potential for a lot of people. I don't know anybody that has ever overdosed on cannabis. I know an awful lot of people that have overdosed. Yeah, I wish I didn't. So, this is the website, Cannabis Patient Pacific Northwest. We have a bunch of different things. Again, this is a guide to obtaining medical card. We have recommended brands and products. Cannabis-friendly physicians. This is, both folks that are helping doing authorizations, as well as pharmacists, and then, dispensaries that we like around. So, it's awesome to be able to go to a brick and mortar, but you can get a lot of cannabis products online. I will, though, say that some of those products are pretty questionable. And so one of the things that we've done is we have gone and built one of our board members has a CBD website that she markets a bunch of different brands that we have vetted that are pretty good to be able to order and to get. A lot of them are local producers. And so, there's also good stuff about who we are. You can even, shop, get some t-shirts and maybe donate. Anyway, this has been a great experience to talk to you folks and to be able to just participate in a forum with people that I am so intimately connected with. I'm gonna quit talking for a while and open it up to questions. Okay, awesome. And get out of this.
Well, I'll jump in and just say thank you, Jeremy, so much for talk about a depth and breadth of knowledge. You pretty much touched on A to Z and then some. And Rob put in the chat the website link that if anyone wants to go to it, there it is. It's a formidable website, and they've got lots of resources and lots of education that you can get to on there. We didn't see any real questions come through in the chat. I know Balin had asked a question offline, was talking about, kind of the best stuff for pain. I'm trying to pull up the question that they gave us the other day. I don't know if Balin can type it in right now, but yeah, she was looking for, looks like she said, looking for a non-psychoactive product that's good for muscle discomfort and or spasticity. Got a lot of pain in a hip that was broken last year. And same kind of thing going to sleep. And it sounds like you were using a handful of those, like a dab pen and but any suggestions you might have?
Well, so there's a bunch of stuff. It depends on your pain level. I think I always recommend people kind of start out with basic things that are not very formidable, are pretty easy. And so checking out like CBD gummies, checking out maybe a mix of CBD and THC, but they do a lot of ratios. And so because you're dealing with pain, what I know is that CBD helps, but it's really THC that better targets pain. And so finding a ratio that is not too psychoactive, but still able to handle that pain. And so, I use something that's close to 1-to-1. Sometimes though, I use more like a double the amount of THC to CBD. But there's also all those reverses, and there's amazing products that are like 5-to-1. So 5 parts CBD to 1 part THC, 10-to-1, and even up to 20-to-1. And at that level, it's very, very not psychoactive. For products that are like an alcohol or a distilled product, they really work well. You can just like a little tiny bit and get a great relief from it. The other thing is that these are fairly inexpensive, whereas when you're buying gummies, you're going to end up paying a lot more. Is that Melissa raising her hand?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question about a sleep aid. I have tried, oh my gosh, some different CBD oils, different brands and types. And then I've also done the gummy. I just can't find anything that I'm either, like you said, you get up and you're too groggy or feel hungover, or they give me anxiety where I can't sleep. But I've been searching. I have a lot of issues with insomnia, and I have been searching for, I don't even know how many years, trying to find something. And so I wanted to see if you had any specific recommendations, or if I should look on the website that I could try, that was a specific company selling it, or something that I could try to, I have a lot of issues with sleeping.
So what you're looking for is a product called CBN, and CBN it can be intoxicating, but it really is meant to put you to sleep. And there are transdermal CBN products. I believe it's Mary's Medicinals that makes them. I'm not positive, but you should be able to Google CBN patches or transdermal patches, and they should pop up. One of my board members is doing a blog on CBN this next month, and I think her company, and so CBN is just starting to gain popularity. It's again these novel, what they call novel cannabinoids. I mean, we've known about them for a long time, but they have not been popular until they started really working well for something. And so CBN really does work good for sleep, and it doesn't it is not as, you're not going to feel as groggy the next day as you would if you were just taking, you know, a bunch of THC gummies. The other thing too is if insomnia is still an issue for me, and so I'm not the best. Even with CBN, even with all this stuff, my spasms still wake me up. It's still an ongoing process, and you know, I'm up 2-3 times a night. And so I don't really take any sleep aids per se, and and so if you live close to a local dispensary, the other thing that you could always do is either find their website or give them a call, and they should be able to, before you have to go in there, be able to direct you either to a different place that has them, or you know, and so a lot of times I'm able to befriend the manufacturers, and unfortunately I don't know Mary's Medicinals, and I'm pretty sure that's who makes them.
Okay, I can look it up and see. I've tried quite a few different supplements, and that's the same issue. Is I don't like how I feel in the morning. My biggest issue, is getting to sleep, because I just lay there for hours.
Okay.
So I have tried, like I said, different supplements, and I haven't had any luck with those as well. So I did try the gummies and the oils, and just like I said, I just haven't been able to find that perfect remedy for it. But I'll definitely try that. I haven't looked those up before, the CBN or the transdermal. I'll definitely research that and see.
Yeah, I like them because they're under $20, and you can they just work really good and don't require that you have to eat anything, which sometimes, if you eat stuff before you go to bed, you have stuff on your belly, that makes me not sleep well. And then if I have to, sit and vaporize a bunch of stuff too, it's not always the most fun right before I go to sleep. But so I can fall asleep, but then I can't stay asleep. So there's all these little nuances of it's really and so this is a great topic that I will have to continue to research, because I don't have a good answer. I wish I did.
Yeah, you're correct about, because I do eat early. I try to eat around 6 o'clock, and then I don't, go to bed until probably midnight. And I have found that with the oils, a lot of times it would upset my stomach, because I didn't have really any food in my stomach for quite a while. So that was an issue, was making me kind of feel nauseous.
Yeah.
Taking it so late. But then if I take it earlier, I don't go to bed really early. So that's a good point about the stomach.
Yeah.
Finding something that's not going to upset your stomach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it looks like
I appreciate that.
from Rob Wood on here also. It sounds like he's done a lot of trial and error about a high THC vape pen with this strain Do-si-do. But yeah, it sounds like it's going to be kind of a personal concoction from what Jeremy's saying too.
Oh, okay, I just saw his comment.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Because I think you pretty much nailed kind of top to bottom, Jeremy. Thank you so much for being such a great resource, and we've got all your information. We're going to cut these up and put them on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. We've got all the ones from 2020 online right now on our YouTube channel, and we're going to be putting the rest of them probably up within the next few weeks. And this one will be a pretty simple one to cut, because you pretty much did all the hard work for us.
Well, let me say I'm not a medical professional, so talk to your doctors about this stuff. And, if you guys have questions in the future, by all means, contact me, contact our group. And, it's not for everybody, but what I encourage is people to, I try to empower people to take better control of their health. I know that I've dealt with a lot of doctors that have told me what I need to do. And, you know, I'm a good patient. I always try things out, but in the long run, I had to discover what is best for me and my health and stick to it. And so I just encourage everybody to figure those things out and to live the best life that they can. So anyway, thank you guys again. It was an honor to be here, and I look forward to more interactions in the future.